We're not broadcasting, right?
It's
We are?
live.
Oh, it is streaming
yes,
live.
yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Well,
Okay.
we open to the public so they know that we're running late.
Got it. Okay. We're just waiting for a few people to join. We took a little bio break. I think we're all here, right?
Okay, just let me start the recording.
Perfect. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to our late work session of January 25th, 2022. Can I have a motion, please, to open the work session?
So moved.
Second.
Ooh, that
All
was
in
good.
favor?
Aye.
Getting there.
Jinx.
Okay, perfect. Jill, do you want to start us off, or Ed?
Sure. The first thing that we've got on our agenda tonight, Sabrina's here to talk to us. Oh, actually, Sabrina and Ed are both here to talk to us about the proposed local law to expand the 10% AFFH requirement to the BR and BRP zoning districts. We've got an introduction to this local law. There's a couple of maps that came along with it for the board's and the public's reference. Ed, Sabrina, who wants to go first?
Sabrina, you want to? Well, actually, I'll start, Sabrina, if that's okay, and then I'll hand it off to you.
Sure.
Just by way of overview, this is a straightforward extension of the AFFH requirement that's already in the town code by definition, and applying it to 2 additional districts where it doesn't currently exist. That's the BR and the BRP districts. We have those in the Chappaqua Hamlet. It's also a BR district in Millwood. But again, the requirement with respect to affordability, all of the definitional requirements would stay the same. They're already in the town code, and this local law would just apply them in these 2 additional districts. Sabrina, do you want to, I'll hand it off to you, and do you want to add anything with respect to, from a planning perspective?
From a planning perspective, historically, the commercial zones did not have an AFFH requirement when the town was considering such, for 2 reasons. Primarily because the first floor requirement to have retail, commercial retail, was prohibitive in regards to really achieving actual affordable units. The other mechanism that was introduced into the code to encourage affordable housing, along with several other types of housing, was the multifamily zones, both multifamily Chappaqua and multifamily Millwood. Those zones allowed for the development of housing that included an affordable housing component. And then there was other types within those areas, that there are overlay areas within each of the zones. That is how the Conifer building was constructed, that gave incentives in regards to different things to fit a building on a lot. If you provided senior housing, so the, parking reduction. So those overlay zones created an environment where we could achieve affordable units in the hamlet areas and designated areas. So this is the first time where you guys are contemplating introducing affordable housing where there is a first floor commercial requirement in the business retail zones of the 2 hamlets. So I have no comments other than to give you that background. The one other point I do want to make, and I don't know where any of you sit with this. Typically, as you see in the MFC, that is known as Conifer, that developer is a much larger developer than, for example, 91 Bedford. By requiring AFFH with the existing conditions or the existing standards, if you will, in the commercial districts, it will be very challenging to achieve 1 unit because of the other restrictions that we have with parking requirements, with building height, and with our small lot sizes, small and shallow depth lot sizes. However, there's also the opportunity to, there may be a one-off where we can achieve an actual diversity of housing. So that's kind of what I wanted to say to you, just to give you the background of why it hasn't been done before, and kind of the things that you can look to, whether or not you can really understand it making a difference.
Of course, can you just explain to me, though, when the form-based code was being considered, an affordability requirement was being proposed there on the same lot sizes, and initially, retail was still going to be required on the ground floor in those areas. So how do you justify kind of saying that, well, it's probably can't be done here, but it could have been done there?
The form-based code included an additional height in the buildings. That additional height created additional usable area. So it's as if you had an as-of-right 3-story building where you could have more housing and the number of housing that would help meet that affordability requirement. So even though it was the same lots, you were allowing, you were freeing up building height to create an additional story, which by creating an additional story would allow additional housing units up to the number where we could achieve an affordable unit.
Mhm.
That's why.
So this BR area that we are contemplating now, that includes the train station. If that were ever developed, it would require 10% affordability.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Anything designated BR or BRP.
Mhm. Okay. Town board members, any questions? Anything you want to discuss?
Well, I would just like to ask Sabrina, so your advice or your, explanation to us really has to do with the area remaining static in terms of zoning and what's allowed currently.
Well, what do you mean by the area remaining static?
With
In other
the
words, if we
zoning
don't
remaining-
change zoning, right, Vicky? If we don't
Right.
change zoning.
To allow for higher
We're
buildings.
saying we're creating 10% affordable housing, but leaving everything exactly as is.
Right, I think it will be challenging to achieve a meaningful affordable unit. If you,
Right, but I don't think that we've ever contemplating leaving things static as is. I mean, certainly what.
again, I don't
Right.
know what your intentions are, right? What I'm
Okay.
saying to you is kind of, you're asking for me to weigh in on this AFFH change. And I'm kind of giving you, where it fits in realms to the existing zoning. If you are anticipating making zoning changes, then, what I'm saying may not be true. But right now, if you enact this law, then there will be a period of time until you may make other changes where this law will not produce an affordable unit or will produce, very little.
Understood. No, I appreciate that. Okay.
Sabrina, isn't the parking lot of the train station industrial?
There's a portion that is industrial. I don't have the map in front of me.
Oh, sorry, Sabrina.
I have the map. The area around like the circle, not the back parking lot. The front parking lot is BR.
Yeah,
The back parking lot was industrial.
yeah.
Right, so
And there's other
where we,
restrictions in that area around the circle too.
Can you say that again, Sabrina?
I said there are other restrictions within the train station, particularly in front of the train station building. It is a designated park. It's parkland.
Right, but this is including the parking lot area also.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sabrina, you mentioned 91 Bedford. Have you had any conversations with developers in terms of the impact of this legislation and the financial viability of future projects?
I have had conversations with developers because, as you know, 91 Bedford was constructed and, there have, it's first floor affordability requirement with 2 floors of residential above. There's been a lot of conversation about the success of tenanting the first floor commercial, finding tenants, and if it was possible to convert that to residential. In my conversations, converting that to residential, at the same time that I was having these conversations, you all were talking about requiring an affordable unit. If it was converted, there's 3 units of commercial now. If they were converted to 3 units of residential, he would have the numbers of residential units under the 10% that would require 2 affordable units. He said it would be difficult for him to accommodate 2 units. 1 would be okay, but 2 might be difficult. And, one of the things that in my experience, and not necessarily in working, in speaking to developers in Chappaqua, but in my circles of professional planners, when you start creating restrictions. There's two type of developers. There's your local developer. They develop maybe 1 or 2 projects at a time. And then there are national developers who may have 14 projects, you know, in a wider geographic area occurring. A national developer is more apt to say, yes, I'll give you 2 units of affordable housing or 5 units in this 24-unit building, because I can make up the cost in my other properties. A smaller developer may not have the liquid assets to make up that cost, right? They may be beholden to what they're developing now and profits from what they're developing now. So in my circles, we've always talked about the local developer versus a national developer and how regulations affect both of those realms of in the development community. A larger developer will be able to absorb more of the regulations because they can pass it off in several other projects, whereas a local developer may not be able to. So that's just something to keep in the back of your minds as we are talking about creating changes to the zoning, increasing affordability and kind of where we sit. The 91 Bedford is not there. We consider 91 Bedford a local developer. You know, I don't want to specifically drill down on one project, but, you know, a lot of the projects that we see in the building department are from local developers. Conifer was one of the first larger developers where we were working with somebody who, where on the small side, a 29 unit development is small for them. It's huge for us, but it is small for them.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Well, that was a little different because that's 100% and they got a lot of subsidies and they're a little different. But my concern is that if we don't have this in place, no developer is going to come in unless you're a Conifer where that's your business is building 100% affordable housing buildings. No developer is going to come in and say, please let me build affordable units because they don't make as much money off of them. I want to make sure that we incentivize them to do that and make sure that we require them to build that, which actually is in conformity with what Westchester is asking us to do as well and their affordability thresholds. You know, from what I understand, like at a place like 91 Bedford, they didn't build affordable because they weren't required to. Had they been required to, we would have had a minimum of 1 unit in it, which is better than 0.
But it would require, but that's sort of not a rational conclusion, because what we're hearing from Sabrina is that it's 3 stories, 14 units now, that he would have to have 2 units of affordable. And that would be a difficult thing for him to do. So he may have been disincentivized to, in fact, build that building because he would have to have 2. We're not saying less than 10%. We're saying 10% with the round up. So that doesn't really hold water. And I'm not quite sure. I don't understand how you say we're incentivizing big developers from coming in and somehow building these giant owning affordable housing structures. I think Conifer was a one-off on that front. But what sort of surprises me that we're having this conversation, because, and you may not all want to hear it, but what I did is a little homework and I went backwards. And in one of your campaign blasts, you described this exact 10% AFFH change as an immediate fix to create both vibrancy and affordability. And that this 10% affordable mandate at 3 stories helps guarantee diversity of housing in the hamlet. Why we're engaging Sabrina now, this was your position. We heard Ben Herman multiple times, and either you agreed, Lisa, because you were on the board, or there was silence saying, we could have retail, we could have affordable, we can do it in 3 stories. And if that's what you really believe, and I don't think it's based on data, and what we're hearing from Sabrina, it's certainly not anecdotal, and I don't know whether or not you've spoken to any developers that would say otherwise, and if you have, please share with us that they said they would do this. But it strikes me as an odd thing to do, and I think that it sounds good on paper, but it will unfortunately have the reverse impact, meaning that it won't get the housing because it won't bring the development. And if we don't bring that development, you're not going to see a current landowner, small property owner, say, I want to put on one more level to add a few more units, and now he or she has to put on another affordable component. It's just not likely that that's going to happen. So I think Sabrina made a good point. Who are you going to incentivize to do that is someone who might be an outside developer as opposed to a local owner who can afford to take a loss, maybe at this property, to gain it some money, to make it up elsewhere. I think that we have to not, at least you had said it during one of our conversations, that getting it done right is more important than simply getting it done right now. And getting it done right now with affordable housing by just saying 10% across the board is not the answer. It's the right concept, but we have to see how it works with other zoning as it goes down the road. And I know you all spoke to not just some public engagements, but real full-on charrettes that you had said multiple times you wanted to do. So before we make this decision, let's do what you all promised. Let's have those charrettes. There's not just public hearings. Let's bring them and say how we can do this. If you really believe it's 3 stories is sufficient, then by all means, pull the trigger. But I don't think that it works from what we're hearing based on, well, depends whose data you believe, and based on what we're hearing from Sabrina.
So I would beg to differ, Jeremy, just because you see that 10% affordability requirement in, many other locales, and you see small independent developers as well as national. I think we're a highly desirable town, and developers can find ways to make that deal pencil. So I think that some of the evidence we've looked at does feel anecdotal in nature. Perhaps this does bear further investigation, but to say that it's outright, it won't work and will prohibit development, I think is a stretch.
So my question in response to that is, where have the developers been without this requirement? And then the next question would be, and they haven't been here, do you and the rest of the board believe that some fixes we may make to the planning board process will cure that ill, to then say, you haven't come before, we're now adding this requirement of affordability, 3 is fine, you're going to make it with 3. Do we believe that whatever the planning board is going to come up with and whatever changes they may make is going to say, now look, it's inviting, there's an incentive, you should come here, and they're going to build? Because listen, it's not my certainly line of work, but that's not what the evidence in the history has shown would be successful going forward. And I don't think that that's a right route to go. But nonetheless, if you believe it works for 3 stories, then do it. I'm just fearful that it will step us back or put us on hold, for lack of a better term.
Well, I'll just say this, and I'll speak for myself. I have never focused on the 3 stories. What my focus has always been with the goal of bringing vibrancy to our town, a mix of housing options and diversity to our town, with development that's responsible, that's sustainable, and that's mindful of our environment, and doesn't leave developers in complete control of the pace and extent of development. So we can have negotiated outcomes with developers, and I don't see, for myself, I'll just speak for myself, I don't see why we would be limited to 3 stories across the board. And that seems to be, the crux of your argument to us, Jeremy, is that we're fixated on 3 stories all over town. So, I think there are ways that we can work with developers to make this feasible. And I do agree with the public input aspect. I think it could be late in the game for technical charrettes, because that's something that should have been done with a form-based code. In fact, it's part of the form-based code institutes structuring of a form-based code. So it should have been done. I don't know. I don't have enough expertise to say if charrettes is the way to go, but certainly some format for public input, I think, is crucial as well. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I don't think we need to rehash the form-based code. What I do think we need to do as a community is to decide if we want to push forward affordability and housing, or if we don't. And if it's a requirement in our current zoning, then we will work with developers to make sure it gets done. If it is not a requirement, it will never get done, because no developer is going to say, please let me build a less attractive apartment for me, and which is less profitable by saying less attractive. So I think we as a community need to decide, as a town board, is this something that we want to say this is important to us and we're going to put it in there, or do we not? And, you know, I think that, Jeremy, this is not an election right now, so I don't need to rehash that. I think had you paid attention, you would have seen that the reason we were against the form-based code, and I was in particular, is because it's giving developers control over our hamlet, where instead I want us as a town board, a planning board, and all of our residents to take that control. And to me, putting in an affordability requirement is something that we absolutely should be saying that this is important to us as a community. It doesn't necessarily mean every building in town is going to be 3 stories. This again is including the train station. It's including a lot of areas in town that, but for a requirement, if a building was going up there, they would not put any affordable units in there. And to me, that's not okay. It doesn't mean it's done in a silo. We'll be looking at zoning. We're going to be looking with the community at other options as to how we can make a vibrant community that's in scale with the size of the hamlet and that makes sense for both topography, our environment, our schools, everything else. But it doesn't mean that we can't also say it's important to us to add an affordability component.
Did you want to say something before Chris, before I respond?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that again, I think Lisa hit it right there. You know, this is one aspect of it, and Sabrina's comments were conditioned on the idea that nothing else changes. And as Lisa just pointed out, that's not in any way, shape, or form a given. I don't think anyone, certainly of the 4 of us, ever said that that would be the case coming in. So that shouldn't be anyone's assumption. That's number one. And number two, I mean, my understanding of the requirement is it's for units, multifamily developments of at least 5, but less than 10. So when you mentioned, you know, someone wanting to put up 1 or 2 units, I don't think it would apply to them unless I'm missing something. So that could still happen in the hamlet. So I think that's another point just to note. But most importantly, again, we've all been for responsible, sustainable in-scope development. And I think that that's part of the process, and that's something we're going to be looking at comprehensively.
So I appreciate what you all are saying, and this is not about the form-based code. To Vicky's point moments ago, it's not about whether there should have been or could have been or charrettes in the form-based code. That's history. What my point, and this is something that I take seriously, and I believe you all do as well, is that you mean what you say when you say what you mean. And we hear from Ben Herman, and I'll use him as an example because it was 3 stories can be done. There was no objection and there was approval. And when I look at what was put out that said, not if we have 4 stories, but this is an immediate fix. This 10% we're talking about now, how we create both vibrancy and affordability, and it helps guarantee diversity of housing in the hamlet. It's just not right. And then I'm going to follow up, and it is what it is, Elisa, but I look at something you shared on from February 23rd. Let's cut to the chase. I am completely against 4- and 5-story buildings in the Chappaqua hamlet.
As a matter of right.
We go on to say, that's not what you say there, but we need a genuinely diverse working group made up of town residents and stakeholders like the BOE, library, merchants, and every other stakeholder. And we have to form that immediately to begin an effort to conduct proper charrettes. You go on to say this in varying ways. Anything we do has to be preceded by a proper series of
Jeremy,
charrettes.
what's the point of this? This is not talking about affordable housing.
Yes, it is.
To try to make me look bad for some reason to
The
continue.
point is to hold you accountable for your words, and this may be.
Jeremy, you know, before
Jeremy, we just
Jeremy,
talked about
hold on,
hosting a
hold on.
workshop.
Uncalled
We just
for.
discussed this.
Sorry.
So
Clearly,
This feels political in
I'm
nature.
looking
affordable
for
housing.
you. I am
Listen.
looking for you to do
Yeah.
what you said you were going to do, which is that you're going to have another example is have a separate, genuinely diverse resident-led group, working group formed in conduct to be parallel to these efforts to review the planning board process. That's something that you said was gonna
And
happen
we
as
are
well.
doing
So-
that, and we have a
So
joint meeting
can we-
scheduled with the
can we-
planning board on
Can we stop,
February
So
we just
before
stop,
we
can we
rezone-
stop
before you
wasting
consider
everyone's
rezoning
time?
10%,
I know.
Can we
before
stop
you
wasting
consider-
everyone's time?
Before
Can we
you,
stop
I'm
wasting
sorry
everyone's
that
time?
I'm
Jeremy,
holding you accountable
Jeremy,
for your words
we
and
heard
pointing
you,
out the
Jeremy,
accuracy.
Jeremy,
Okay,
we
Jeremy.
just suggested
This
that
is
an
no
hour
longer
a
ago. I don't know
campaign.
why you're acting
We
as though
heard you.
the suggestion was not made. This is not your idea.
10%
Jeremy, we heard
is
you.
not, is
We
not.
heard you
Jeremy.
ad nauseum.
Okay.
You need to stop. We heard you, okay? Can we stop wasting everyone's
Yeah,
time?
Yeah,
with
it's
I'm not wasting
saying
anyone's
juvenile,
time.
on day-
it's sour
on day
grapes, we
25
understand.
On
But
day
now there's-
All
25,
right,
on day
mean what you
25
say
of
and
the
say
new
what you
year, that
Mean
you've
what
got a
you say and
checklist
say
of
what you
things
mean.
that everyone said, and you're gonna hold us to that, including what Ben.
mean what you
Herman said.
say.
No,
and say
we
what
heard
you
it,
mean.
Jeremy. And
We're
so in a
done.
year's
Thank you,
time,
Chris.
Jeremy.
in a
Thank
year's
you, Chris.
time,
Jeremy,
You're acting
this
in
is
a
not in the
year's
best interest
time,
of the town,
you can pick up
please.
the
Mean what you
checklist
do.
and
Please.
see.
Stop being
I
so
think I've
politically
made my point.
motivated.
Right
I
now, it's a
made my point.
tremendous
You'll do
waste
what you're
of
going to
time.
do.
Jeremy, I
Sucking
just
the
suggested
oxygen out of
hosting
the
a
room.
workshop an hour ago. Why are you
Not
acting as
about a
though this is a
workshop.
novel idea?
Okay,
Like, workshop is a
But go ahead.
charrette.
Go ahead.
guys,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
we will put Jeremy down as against the affordable housing, we understand. And I always intend to stand by my words, and this is part of what I've always said, and this is what I moved forward to. I said I wanted to do this in my 100 days. I put this forth months and months ago, and it was shot down by the board, despite saying that if you don't want a form-based code, then you're a racist. So now we're doing something about that. And I think it's very important. It just depends how we want to do that. If you want to make, again, a statement that we feel that this is important for our community to diversify housing. It again does not mean it's done in a silo. And I think that this is something I would much like to push forward. If you don't want to, Jeremy, that's fine. And we can definitely put you down as anti.
Getting it done right is
That
more
is
important than simply getting it done now. You're
Okay,
correct.
so can I just
Those
make
will
one
do
other
that.
comment, because this has been going on now for the 3 weeks that we've all been aboard. It's not very productive for Jeremy to approach these meetings as a gotcha checklist. You can write an editorial, you can leave the board and become a columnist if that's what you want to do. But right now, we're just trying to get things done. In a year's time, there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to look back and say, this board didn't live up to what it said. But right now, let's work through the problems. Let's find solutions, because everything you've done since the election to now has been, this is the timeline we're going to hold you to. These are the things you said. Well, we just got seated 3 weeks ago to say, why are we hearing from Sabrina on this? You guys had a chance to talk about it. Well, this is our opportunity to hear from Sabrina, right? We didn't have an opportunity. We weren't on the board before. So this is a proposed legislation. We're going to work through it. We're going to think about it in the context of other changes that could be made. And that's what's going to happen. To keep wasting our time and saying, well, this is what you said, you haven't done it yet. It's January 25th, Jeremy. So it's a waste of everyone's time.
You're misconstruing my words. You're not being
so.
reasoned.
I don't
And
think
I
so.
never asked you why you're speaking with Sabrina. You certainly heard from her before as a resident. I'm not saying that you don't have the opportunity to do this. I am saying to you, this.
No, you're
plan
saying
that
the
you're looking
answer
at
should
is
have
not-
been in our
this
pocket the day
plan
we
is not
joined the
right
board,
plan,
and that's
it's
idiotic.
part based on things that you have said. It's very simple. If it upsets you, Chris,
Very
you have to
silly. No,
strengthen up
it's
a little
very
bit and
silly,
understand
Jeremy,
that
and it's a
sometimes
waste of
it doesn't
time
go the way you
and
want it. So I'm
sucking the
sorry.
oxygen
I
out
have,
of the
I
room.
have not, no.
Yes.
Jeremy, please assume
Okay.
good intent and let's come together as a board and do good things for the
So
town, right?
what is important to me
Go
as
ahead, go ahead.
as
We're going in
supervisor of
circles
this
here, but I
town,
appreciate your comment,
is-
Chris. I think that's unfortunately far from spot on. So thank you very much.
So what's
ahead, Lisa.
important to me as supervisor of this town is to work collaboratively. It does not mean that we are all going to agree all the time. And I don't expect us to. And in fact, I think we will come out with better outcomes when we disagree. That is working collaboratively, however, is very different than trying to find gotchas all the time. So Jeremy, I would urge you to work collaboratively with the board. It again
Thank
doesn't mean you have to agree all the time. I don't expect you to. I don't expect that Chris is going to agree with me or Vicky or Tara all the time. And that's okay. But we need to work respectfully and collaboratively together. So I would urge you to try to do that.
There is nothing disrespectful in what I said. If anything, it was quite disrespectful what Chris said. I will share again one last statement, which is I do not believe this will work without something greater for height and not for 3 stories. And we should look at it holistically and it's not going to happen in the first 100 days. There's not a rush to do it.
Mhm.
And whether or not someone previously believed that it would work all in 3 stories, I firmly believe it will not. I don't oppose affordable housing by any stretch of the imagination. I just want a plan that will genuinely work to make it a reality.
So I'd like to say something. So Jeremy, I think you're right that if we remain static with 3 stories, this might not work. So we're going to be looking at many options, but I just want to say on a different matter, related matter to what's just happened here. You know, I've served on another board for a long time. And what you want to do as a board is encourage discussion and also encourage the public to come to us to give us their feedback. And, you know, we don't want to scare people off. So I think that it's really a best practice. And I know that I can't control what people say. Everyone has the right to say what they want to do. And I say this with all due respect, but naming individual people from the community at our board meeting, I think is a bad practice. So I would just like us to keep that in mind. I know people have come and made comments to the board, but just singling out people at our meetings, naming them by name, I think is just, could have a chilling effect on people coming to the board and participating. So I would just like to ask, with all due respect to everyone's, good intentions, that we, refrain from bringing people into our discussions if it's not necessary.
And I appreciate that as a general concept. The reason why he's being referenced is because this was a big piece that he shared his own beliefs and positions on multiple times.
I
And we
understand.
heard it. So there's no chilling
understand.
effect in that one. It's something that
Right.
he specifically articulated in his.
But it's not
relevant
us, right? It's somebody else. But I.
Well, it is. We're going to go back
So-
and forth, but it is.
Okay. Okay.
Something that I would like to do, so I agree we shouldn't do that. That being said, if we do decide to move this forward, we will have a public hearing. And at that point, I really would like to hear from people who, frankly, with the exception of Tara, I think, none of us on the board are fully versed in, real estate and whether this is doable and how feasible all of this is. But I would like to move it forward and then hear from experts in their field, including people that Jeremy mentioned this evening, who do that for a living. And yes, Sabrina does as well, but part of the public input process as part of a public hearing is to make sure that we hear from all residents and to get all of those facts. So is that right, Ed? This would move to a public hearing, correct?
Absolutely. That would be the next step. The next step would be, we would have a resolution on next week's agenda to set a public hearing. We could pick a date in February, and also to refer the proposed local law to the Newcastle and Westchester County planning boards. And what I'm hearing, frankly, from the board is that this particular legislation is an important step, but it's also a first step. And there's more work to do, and it's going to be difficult. But the board, as I understand it, is looking to have that conversation and leverage perhaps some of the work and community input that we had over the last 2 years. Look, the form-based code was one approach, but it wasn't the only approach. And I look forward to working with the board to try to come up with something that will pair and complement the AFFH legislation that you're working on tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it. You put it that way, Ed, because what I've said before in a different context is that the goals of the form-based code were goals that I think a lot of us shared. The difference was the implementation of those goals. So I do think we can all work together to implement those goals as closely as possible.
As do I.
You're here.
So is there a date in February that we want to pencil for that resolution? Just open the public hearing. Christina?
Can we do the 8th?
You're going to have a hard time. So you're going to set the public hearing for the 8th.
8th, is that a meeting or a work session?
That's going to be a town board meeting. And then we're going to have to give the planning board and Newcastle Planning Board and Westchester County Planning Board 30 days to return their comments. So we're talking about, our public hearing will be in March. Does that work?
Well, can't we have a public hearing while, we are not gonna close a public hearing, I guarantee you, until
Right.
probably March. So
Right, so we only
why
have
can't,
one,
we just need to leave it open for 30 days. We can still commence a public hearing, correct?
right, but we only have 3 dates in February. So we have the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th.
Mhm.
And then we don't meet that 4th Tuesday, Chappaqua Central School District break. And so the next date would be March for the public hearing.
So let's set the public hearing for the 8th, right? And
No,
then
you-
we can set it
No.
for the 8th and then continue it and make sure it stays open for 30 days. Do we
No,
have to
you-
wait for the planning board?
There has to be a public notice. So there's an authorization to set a public hearing that will occur at a town board meeting. That will
Next week.
occur. Okay, that's a work session. We were going to try to get it back on. Fine, but we don't usually give 7 days notice. We usually give, well, Ed, what's the least amount of time we can give?
It's 10, and I'm looking at the calendar now, and now that you mentioned that it's a short month and we have one, I think we're really talking about our early March date to actually schedule the public hearing.
Why?
Well, we only
Why
have,
can't we schedule a public hearing in February to begin, not to close it?
well, to actually open the public hearing.
Open it, not to close it.
Right, I actually think that March is going to, I was thinking the end of February, but now that I look at the calendar, I think opening the public hearing in early March makes more sense. Maybe it's March 1st, it's a Tuesday.
I'm sorry, why?
Because you still need to set the statutory required notice for a public hearing.
Which
It's
is 10 days. So
Right.
it's still January.
Right, but we're not doing it tonight.
February's not that short a month.
Well, the resolution to do this will be next week, so that'll be February 1st, and then add 10 days, and I think we're already been bumping right up against the 15th. So I'd suggest March 1st. I don't think we're gonna, as a practical matter, lose any time. I think it will not move, certainly move any quicker if we try to jam it in February.
Okay, and we don't have a meeting on February 15th?
That's the last meeting, right, Jill, for
Right.
February?
Yeah, so Lisa, it looks like if we do it March 1st, we'll lose, 3 days. We could do it the 15th, but
We
then
could
we
do
have
it the
3 days.
15th and then continue it on the 1st.
Yeah. If we do it the 15th, then 3 days from there, you run into the school break, so all I'm saying is that we would just lose 3 days. I don't know why we couldn't do it the 15th, but
I
I
think,
kinda get
you know,
what
I'd
Ed-
like to give as much time to hear from residents as possible. So I wouldn't mind starting at the 15th, but I will tell you right now, it's not gonna close the 15th.
right.
And then it would be continued into March.
So what's the rush? I'm confused. And what's the rush to do it if you're gonna keep it open to give ample opportunity to be heard? Is there anything that's coming down the pike in the next month? Not that I'm aware of, for that matter, the next 2 months probably, or more. I mean, I'm not,
I don't know
so
that
what's
there's
the
a
rush
rush.
to do this so quickly?
There's nothing coming down the road. that
Right, so that's what I mean. So
rushed.
what
I
do
just-
we, right?
think it's important to consider, and we've been talking about, this was first broached quite a while ago, so I just want to get this
I-
moving.
Yeah, I don't see, I have no issue with whenever you put it, but I think 15th, pardon me, the 1st is fine. We're talking, as Vicky just mentioned, only a couple days in terms of practical time.
But it's one extra hearing.
It's okay. I mean, I think it's fine to do it the 15th as well. It's not, between now and the 15th is not exactly a rush. So, I'm okay with either the 15th or the 1st. So,
And
up to
it's
you,
not one
Lisa.
extra hearing. We'll have as many hearings as you want, but ultimately, again,
Can't-
it's neither here nor
I
there.
can't advertise it in time for the 1st, right?
No.
To have-
No,
No,
talking
no,
about
no.
February 1st. She's talking
Oh,
about
I thought you, oh, okay.
No,
yeah.
no, no,
Yeah,
no.
I was
Talking
gonna
about
say-
March.
February
March
15th
1st.
or March 1st.
Come on,
Christina's
Christina.
like, I can't possibly do this. No, I know.
It's just, I just fully believe we're not rushing to get it done. I just think it's good governance to give the public as many opportunities as they have to comment on this. So to me,
But
I would like
opening
to
it for
open it the
discussion
15th,
sooner.
and then we
Yeah.
will continue that discussion into March.
Okay, so can we do it on the 15th then?
Yes,
Then let's do it.
okay.
So Christina will set the public hearing on February 1 for the 15th.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Christina.
Ed, related to this, at some point, I don't expect it to be today because I didn't tell you this beforehand, but can we also talk about other affordable housing proposals that are being promulgated at the state level and whether, and explain those to us, and maybe we have Pete Harcum come in and then see if the town board wants to take a stand on any of those
Of course, and
and make
I've been,
comments on any of those, because I know there's a lot of intricacies on some of them, and I know other municipalities have been writing with comments on some of those laws. So I'd like the town board to consider those as well.
I can circulate some materials as well as the proposed legislation. It is a hot topic. The annual meeting of the New York State Bar Association is going on right now, and I know I actually attended a presentation where one of the legislative sponsors talked about his proposed bill. This is accessory dwelling units. So sure, we can certainly circulate some materials and workshop that. Is that are you thinking February?
Yes, because I think there's a lot we're going to need to consider before that.
Okay.
But I know there are a lot of intricacies to those laws. So, and many municipalities are opining on that. So I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that as well.
I'll push out some information to the board at the end of this week.
Okay, there was another local law, Lisa, that you asked Sabrina to come and
Oh,
talk about.
Yes, thank you.
Hotline? Yeah, so maybe we could set multiple public hearings.
So I wanted to just, Rena, since you were going to be here, just understand with the lot line law that we broached, I guess, last week, where that really is coming from, because my understanding is the issue has really only come up a few times in the last number of years. So I just wanted us to all understand, and if we decide to move forward with that, if there are changes we should make now before we have a public hearing to any kind of local law. So I wonder if you could give us a little more flavor on that.
Sure, happy to do so. So my understanding is that it was actually an attorney in Ed's office in working with other municipalities, not necessarily in Westchester, but in other New York State municipalities, and maybe even some in Westchester. We're contemplating making changes where lot line approvals would be an administrative approval due to the nature of that action. They're a type 2 action under seeker. At the same time that attorney was bringing it to the attention of the town, the planning board was discussing ways to expedite their procedures. And part of the planning board's discussion was, in Bob Kirkwood's direction, was that anything that is considered a type 2 action under seeker, the lot line changes being a real low-lying fruit that we could pick off and really make a change, primarily because we've only seen 4 in the past 10 years, maybe. And they're really nominal. It's changing a property line, which requires the agreement of both property owners. It still needs to comply with zoning setbacks. You're not creating new lots. All of that is really an administrative process. And the code right now allows for an expedited approval, but it's really not implemented as an expedited approval. So this was a way to try and expedite it administratively and take it out of the hands of the planning board. Unless it was a lot line change that we couldn't check the boxes with and needed to be approved by a board. So that's where it came from. So council had produced the lot line legislation draft that was reviewed by many department heads and staff in town hall to make sure it was consistent with their responsibilities and their requirements. And the law you have before you is very well vetted from everybody in town that has dealt with lot line changes or the results of lot line changes, right down to the building inspector. So that's what you have before you. It is truly an administrative action. I do know that there were questions and concerns about creating new lots, about somebody doing this multiple times. And, we don't see people, over a period of 2 years acquiring land to create a much larger building. That's not what a lot line change really is. We're talking about large single family properties, some of which can be quite large, some of which can be quite small, selling off areas of their property to neighbors who need them. Many times it's a dispute. Somebody has a fence on somebody else's property. Somebody is over in their development coverage and they have an opportunity to purchase land. But the bottom line is both entities involved in that, or both properties involved in that lot line change have to conform to zoning. And it's not just the size of the lots that makes it zoning compliant. It's not just building setbacks that make it compliant. You have the width of lot, you have buildable area of lot. There's so much criteria that goes into zoning that each of these lots needs to maintain because they were approved as qualified lots. And there's a law in the books, and Ed, I'm sure, can speak to it more so than I can. You can't take a non-conforming use and make it more non-conforming. You can only reduce the non-conformance. So that's very important. And these are all standards that all departments, building, engineering, planning, even the tax assessor, watch over for in accordance with the town code. So the law that you are considering just takes a process for property owners and makes it easier potentially. Okay, you have language in that draft code that says if it doesn't meet X, Y, and Z, you still have to go before the board to get approval, which is it's like that safety net to give staff that ability to say no, if you will. So the history of this is that it's happening in other jurisdictions. And we were looking for things that we could do to try and expedite approvals. And, a lot of times we spend a lot of time, particularly in my office, when we have properties that come before us, particularly now when the easy to develop land has already been developed, where sometimes the lot line change has been made. They've just gone down to the county and made the lot line change. They didn't go to our board. They did it by, their own rights at the time before boards were made or through whatever processes. And they changed they filed a plat and they had a signature. And so many times we end up having to go back through the planning board to make it right. Right. So it's really to clean up things that shouldn't be the way they are and to make things more conforming.
Okay, so I get that. I guess my only thought is if it's only come up 4 times in the last 10 years, what is it? How much is it really expediting? Especially if both parties agree and they come to the planning board. I can't imagine that it really is going to take more than one meeting. And if it is taking more than one meeting, then maybe there's an issue that they should be looking at in the first place. Because now they're doing starting with the public hearing right away.
Well, that was the first time we did it.
Right, right.
Okay, but to be quite honest with you, a project before the planning board at a minimum takes 3 meetings. Okay, so it's not, the one and done is a new phenomenon that we implemented because when staff received the application, we spoke with the chair. We advised that we thought it wasn't worth much discussion with the planning board, that, you know, it was either you wanted to do it or not, that we should send it to public hearing due to the nature of what the project was. A lot line change has been codified as a process that we would need to change, because right now it requires to be submitted. The applications need to be submitted to the board. The board reviews the application, sets a public hearing, and then the next closes the public hearing, and at the next meeting you do the resolution. So it's at least a 3-meeting process. And a
But
lot
Sabrina, is that part of our own code that we could amend? Rather than sending this to the town engineer, couldn't we amend our process here so that the planning board could
absolutely, and
do it in one meeting?
To be quite honest with you, we can change, we're working on making those changes. So you either want to make this an administrative approval or have them go to the planning board and, you know, open up the public hearing when they come.
Sabrina, I'm just curious, could you speak to the issues that were brought up at the planning board meeting? There were issues of creation of flag lots when, you know, a flag lot is not defined right now in our code.
So
I could see her smiling. So you have to understand that you have to expect that we're not experts in the area. So
I'm gonna help you with that.
relying on you to give us advice here.
Okay.
But there were a lot of interesting issues that were brought up at the planning board meeting. So I'm wondering if what you're essentially saying is that those issues are not of any concern to you.
Well, again, it gets to, it's hard to define a flag lot, right? We all understand what it looks like, but when you try, and it's not defined in our code for a reason. We have language in our code that talk about the length of a lot and how wide that lot should be. That language, and it's pretty well formalized in the code, is really saying no flag lots. Okay, by the way it is written, you can define a flag lot and you can call it a flag lot, but there is no one definition for what a flag lot is. What we've done is we've regulated to avoid establishing what you all would term a flag lot by creating minimum width measurements in a lot. So somebody couldn't cut off half of their lot and sell it to somebody else, because you need to be a certain width for a large portion of your lot.
Yeah, I understand, Sabrina, but I heard a lot of, you know, concerning comments at the planning board meeting. So for instance, how frequently can someone ask for an extra 20 feet? You know, how many neighbors can someone take 20 feet from?
No limits
I'm
on
not,
that. Yeah.
right, no limits on that. So is this only for residential? Does this apply to commercial properties in the hamlet?
So lot line changes can occur anywhere. It's an agreement between 2 property owners. If there's 3 property owners, if there's 4 property owners, you know, somebody can do it 20 times, but here's the bottom line.
Is that concerning to you?
No, because the bottom line is you need to have a conforming lot.
Okay, I understand.
In
And
addition-
would there be any look into the purpose of a lot line change? So for instance, what if
You do,
someone,
yes. Why?
so for instance, if someone wants an extra 20 feet because they want to cut down all the trees?
They're not going to be
Yeah.
able to. They have to go for a tree removal.
They're
permit.
okay.
That's what I wanted to say.
right.
In
Okay,
addition,
good. So there, you know, there are a lot of issues that were brought up, and so we have to,
Yes.
you know, consider them.
absolutely.
You know, and just in general, sort of the idea of a strategic incremental acquisition of land. So anyhow, there seem to be some risks in all of this, and if the process can be streamlined through the planning board, that would seem to be the safest way to go. You know, if you can amend the planning board process for lot line adjustments, That would seem to me to be safer.
That's
Can-
that's a discussion for you guys to have. You know,
Yeah,
I'm
can-
giving.
can I
Well,
ask
well, you know, you're our expert here, so I'm asking for your opinion. I know we can consider it, but
Right.
obviously we need some expert advice.
The planning board discussions thus far are in favor of making it an administrative approval. You know, they may change their mind and they may want to maintain it as you know, I can't answer for them.
Did they say that? I don't recall hearing them say that.
They were in support of it.
Okay.
I mean, with all due respect, I did speak with members of the planning board and they were concerned that there are unintended consequences and they were not in favor of it, thinking that because you're now instituting this sort of one and done type, you know, trying to expedite it, and because it comes up so infrequently, that the potential for unintended consequences, that those negatives outweigh the positives at this point. So I'm sort of feeling like, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, I'm sort of feeling like let's see if this is actually needed at some point, rather than just put it in because the 4 times it may come up in the next 10 years might expedite it, when we're already starting controls that already will expedite something, especially if neighbors have agreed. I'm sort of thinking we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here, and if it's needed, then we can always revisit this, but I don't know that it's really needed right now. And I think that there are issues that were brought up at the planning board meeting and certainly that I've thought of that maybe are unintended, that potentially we could limit the legislation so much that those wouldn't come up. But to me, I'm not sure that we need to go there at this point. And maybe this is something that if we really see that it's becoming problematic and very time consuming, we revisit this in the future. And I believe only 2 towns in Westchester actually have this as an administrative item. I think one's Portchester, I don't remember the other one. So we're not seeing that this is what every town does and we're really behind the 8 ball here. So I'm sort of inclined to shelve this until such time as it's really needed or we see that it's a problem. But that's my view, but I'm interested in the rest of the board.
I mean, not to extend this too much longer, but wasn't our discussion last time that we would seek the input of the planning board and then potentially even Westchester County? And so if our planning board is to your point, Lisa, disinclined, I think that's a pretty compelling point to me.
But see, that's the point. Our planning board hasn't actually weighed in on it because that would be, with respect, that would be the perfect purpose of a public hearing. And there actually has been a decent amount of work done by staff behind the scenes, vetting the process. Look, I don't care about the lot line one way or the other, but there's a process in place. And one of the reasons why we ask the planning board to sit and consider a piece of legislation and to come back with us on it is so that this conversation isn't just between a couple of members of the town board and a couple of members of the planning board, but it is a transparent, open conversation so that everybody can be party to it and everybody has the benefit of it. And that didn't happen here. And there's actually a benefit to everybody involved to follow the process and follow the thinking. That's the purpose. We would have gotten the input of
I understand. I understand.
County
Jill,
Planning
I was
Board.
just responding. Sabrina said the planning board was in favor of this, which obviously didn't happen either. So I'm just trying to understand.
The planning
I
board
guess,
is, listen, aside from.
We just showed up and legislation was on our lap. So that was my only point. Obviously, you know, I think it's important to have that input. I guess what Lisa's suggesting, and you know, I don't have an axe to grind one way or the other, but if this is not an urgent matter and it's 4 times in 10 years and there's not a lot of precedent in Westchester, it just doesn't seem like a burning issue. But yeah, I mean, I certainly prefer.
And believe me, nobody was suggesting it was. It's just that if it is on everyone's agenda, that we're going to take a look at the planning board, we're going to take a look at their process, and we're going to take a look at trying to streamline things. Trying to just skim off a low hanging fruit and making an administrative process just seems like one of the easiest steps to move ourselves in the direction that the board has indicated it wants to go.
But
And there was a
Jill,
process
part-
to
Perhaps
it.
a low
I
impact
understand
one.
what you're saying. Part of the reason I wanted to have a joint meeting with the planning board, which
Mhm.
I know they can now do on February 1st, I heard. So we can schedule
February
that.
1st? March
Yes,
1st.
isn't that, no, February 1st, that's the date you mentioned.
No, March
Right.
1st was the date. We mentioned March 1st. March 1st.
Oh, okay, I will check with them, but if that's available. But part of the reason I wanted to do this is to sit down and discuss with them ways that they think they could streamline their processes before we just get a law in front of us. And I actually think we are being transparent. We don't, as a town board, need to bring every thought before the public if we think it's not necessary to do. We're not making legislation that we're not bringing to the public. We're actually not changing something that's currently in the law. So to me, I don't like the implication that we're not being transparent. I think that we're just keeping it as is. We're not actually making a change and trying to hide it. I think this is something that when we have our meeting, we should talk to the planning board about things that they think would be helpful to streamline the process that are supposed to come to the town board. You know, if it's that, you know, what they just did, that they're gonna go immediately to public hearing, that's in their jurisdiction, they can do that. But if there are things that the town board is gonna be asked to really legislate, I'd like to understand from them first through a meeting what they think is coming up and what they think should be done, and have that open discussion in a public meeting. And that was my fault. I thought we said February 1st, but I'll confirm March.
Yeah.
And have that open meeting with them to have those discussions rather than just float a legislative change that potentially doesn't really need to get done because it comes up so rarely.
Okay, not floating, having a full public hearing with input and fully vetting the input of both the Westchester County Planning Board and the Newcastle Planning Board.
What's, the
But we
bottom
don't
line
need
is,
to
what's
make
the
it.
You know
hang
what? It's after 10:30.
What's the
We
hang
should
up
just
on?
move it along. It's fine. Go. We
We're-
have a
we're-
couple of
We're
other things
rushing
on the
through
agenda. So-
zoning for affordable housing, but we can't deal with this little itsy bitsy low hanging fruit. Just have an open. proceeding.
Because Jeremy,
It's a low priority item.
Yeah.
That's
but
the
let's do
issue.
it.
Okay. Sabrina, I think we can let you go. Thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much,
Unfortunately, I
Thank
will
you,
see you
Sabrina.
really early
Good
tomorrow
night.
morning. My apologies.
Thanks,
Nice.
Sabrina.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Okay. I don't know if Rob Fleischer is still on the line or not, this poor guy. Talk about misrepresentations. I told him.
He's still here.
9:15. Oh,
Oh,
anyway.
well,
Lisa, we were contacted by Chris Bradbury over in Purchase, asking whether or not we would consider a resolution in support of the Westchester County Advisory Board's regulation regarding the latest of the airport air emission study. You had mentioned to me that this is a committee that you've attended,
Yes.
these meetings. We also have Rob Fleischer on the line. Carrie, is it possible to let Rob speak?
Hold on one moment.
while he's joining, so this was something, I think it was the Rybrook that actually sent it to us, not Purchase.
Yes, that you're right. I'm
Um,
sorry, Rebecca.
And they sent this to us, to North Castle, to Rye, and one other place, which I can't remember now. Maybe Portchester.
I'm here.
So,
Oh, hey, Rob.
where they have made, they signed a resolution asking the town to really consider many things in the master plan that they're considering. I wanted to hear from Rob Fleischer, who obviously sits on the airport advisory board for the county, and I think he was just made vice president. I could be wrong.
Vice Chair,
Vice Chair.
which is mostly a ceremonial title, please.
So I wanted to hear from you, your thoughts. I do attend all those meetings. I missed the last one because we had our inauguration, but I do attend them, but you are obviously much more enmeshed in this. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and we're gonna be stepping back a while now. We had this presentation. The presentation was on, I believe, on 2018 or 2017 data, and we had the actual presentation of the airport emissions study back in July of 2020. So it's a while back now. And after that presentation, there was a working group that was formed that consisted of legislator Nancy Barr and another member of the Airport Advisory Board and a local member of the Rybrook community. And they worked on creating some resolutions to send potentially with the approval of the Airport Advisory Board to the county and to the Board of Legislators. And that was considered, and those resolutions, which were passed by the entire AAB, are what you find contained in what was in the packet. So what I can also give you, to the extent that it's helpful, I can give you each one of the individual resolutions to the extent that's helpful. I can give you my copy of the airport emissions study to the extent that that's helpful. And there's also, I can send you a copy of the video where they made the presentation as well, if anybody wants to see that. In terms of the actual resolution, we sent these in again, I believe it was in March or early part of 2021. I know there's been a lot going on. And I think that one of the reasons why the Village of Rybrook decided to kind of go forward with this process was just to kind of give a reminder to the county that this is important, and wanting to just kind of lend their voice in support to these actions happening. They're not all many of them are not immediate actions, but to the extent that to make sure that they're on the books, and that as the airport, as the Board of Legislatures in the county, whoever considers this, will think about these issues going forward. So whatever can be done, especially in the context of some of them have to do with the upcoming master plan, they get considered, without getting lost in the shuffle.
Right. Now, Rob, not to put you on the spot, but I am. To me, some of this says, hey, county, you said you were going to do A, B, C, and D. We are urging you to actually follow through and do that. But part of it is also asking for some additional enhancements to the study.
I think it blends between those two things. Not so much that you say you were going to. I think it's saying, well, after looking at this study that we all sat through and that the county was kind enough to do, here's how we want to move forward with it. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that after we sent in those resolutions that we haven't heard back yet from the county. Obviously, the county has a lot on its plate. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure that, that we're stressing that these are important aspects that we think would be helpful for both the county and for the surrounding communities.
Exactly.
And something that also speaks to what should happen, like as an example, this study right now gets done, I think, every 10 years. And I think it was our advice, we'd like to see it done every 4 years instead. Because obviously we think it merits that type of attention. The amount of cost that it takes to have somebody actually do this on the outside is not so much that the airport cannot afford that. And to the extent that, I think it's important enough to make that type of expenditure. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these are just looking at things like what are best practices, like making sure we have comparative analysis that is done with other peer group facilities, taking a better effort to work to have the airport tenants and vendors whose input into this process is really important, make sure we go above and beyond to make sure that they participate in a better manner. To look at some of the emissions that are outside the boundaries of the airport, because a lot of the study has to do with just what happens right at the airport. It doesn't look at what happens, say in Pleasantville or in Bedford or here in Newcastle.
Mhm.
So that was one of the resolutions. Another one looked at some like cost benefit analysis of other sustainability initiatives like solar at the airport.
Mhm.
Looking at other kind of negative externalities. It was kind of going down this list. I made some kind of highlights for myself, but just
So-
kind of go ahead.
No, so Rob, then my question for you is twofold. First, is there a reason that you see that this town board should not sign on to this resolution? And second, do you think this resolution goes far enough to advocate for Newcastle with respect to the airport and at least as it relates to the emissions?
I think on these issues, I think it goes far enough.
Okay,
I think there are other issues that this isn't meant to address.
correct.
But I think on these issues it goes far enough. But I'm also, this is a discussion. I think people should take time to take a look at it. Let me know what you'd like me to give you as background for this. Obviously, the Village of Rybrook and their Airport Advisory Board got comfortable with this. All of this is basically, like I said, a condensing of the resolutions that were made by the Airport Advisory Boards. This is not new ground that anybody's covering. It's just kind of adding their kind of stamp of approval and sense of urgency of taking these steps and kind of helping it stand out a bit more in the context of how, as the county looks at the airport and how it goes forward.
Mhm. Okay, and certainly I believe, Jill, you reached out to the members of the airport committee in town, correct?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Rob was the only, I reached out to Dick Goldsmith,
Mhm.
who was out of town and was not available and has
Okay.
not attended meetings, and Rob Fleischer.
Okay,
Bill
so
Gates.
just
Last
make
time
sure
that
Ken
committee-
Silverman and it's there aren't.
We have a full committee. Tara's still on it.
Yep. So
I was,
we should make sure we also reach out to the committee with this resolution and get their thoughts as well.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
Right. Look, I don't think it's a rush to do this tonight. So I don't want anybody get that impression. And I think it's important, our local Airport Advisory Committee, as a wider group, hasn't really met in a very long time. And the structure of it changed a bit over the past couple of years. Originally, I think in the beginning of 2020, it became mostly Jim Smith, Ken Silverman, and John Yanofsky, who were kind of running with things that were going to go to the Airport Advisory Committee. I think we need to kind of take some steps to kind of build that back up. I think it's important, not so much even just
Rob,
for
we have
this.
we have a full committee. Jim Smith hasn't lived in town in 4 years.
No, he was removed out of that threesome, but most of the conversations that I've been involved in have just kind of been with John and Ken over the past couple of years. I'm not aware that committee has met in a while.
So I have a procedural question. So the resolution seems really comprehensive and, Rob, first of all, I want to say thank you so very much for all the work you're doing on this. And you've always brought back a lot of detailed, reports and considerations to the town on this matter. But so I'm hearing that our own town committee hasn't yet met to take a look at this resolution and to come to some conclusion on it. Is that right?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
No, it wouldn't have been Rob. I had the resolution. I reached out to Rob. Rob is
Okay.
yeah.
All right,
and I reached
so-
out to Dick Goldsmith, who was not available. We've got
So as a matter of process, shouldn't it go to our committee
Yes.
first? And then,
Yes.
we would vote? Although I don't see
yes.
anything wrong with the resolution, I
No,
think
no.
probably
Yes.
fine.
I
Right,
think
so we
you
won't
need-
put it down for approval for tonight. We'll, I will bounce it by our town committee, and we'll put it on the agenda after I hear back from the committee.
Okay, because
But
it
I
is on
would
it is on the
definitely-
agenda at this time, right?
It
Right, but
was,
I don't
it
think
is
there was a
part- it's-
we're not gonna
resolution
vote on
for us
it.
to adopt.
Yeah.
yes,
So
we
yeah,
won't.
that's what I'm saying, because it is part of our resolutions to vote on
That's fine.
tonight. So we're going to table that.
Yeah, we'll table it. It's not a
But
problem.
Yeah.
also, Rob Fleischer is obviously intimately involved with this, probably more than definitely more than the committee. He's at every meeting. He's now the vice chair of the board. So
Right.
that's also why I wanted to seek his input to see, because he knows, these plans inside and out. And I wanted to make sure that there was nothing in here that was raising any either red flags for him or that he believed we're not going far enough. So we're
Well,
just considering it tonight. We're not going to vote on it.
Right. And I'll be
But
the
let's
first-
look at sorry, I was just gonna say, let's look at this resolution as an opportunity to reinvigorate that committee. This could be the catalyst for that, because it really does need to happen. So,
And I also want to be very clear that, the heavy lifting on this resolution was done by 3 people, two who were on the board, and one was a member of the community who volunteered to kind of help. And so I don't want to take credit where credit is not deserved. I was somebody who, I sat through the emissions study presentation. I did not do the heavy lifting on crafting these resolutions. I understood what they said. I was comfortable with what they did, and I voted to approve them. I don't want to take any credit for drafting all this, because I did not.
Duly noted.
Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
And Jill, to the extent maybe we can connect in terms of how we best get this group together again, because even on the town's website, it kind of has me as the chair, and I don't believe I'm the chairman.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Rob, I've got that. You are in fact the chair of this committee.
I probably have to resign.
Yeah.
You can be you can be the town board liaison.
You may be the
I
liaison.
volunteered for that, actually.
Jill,
Excellent. I'll
Jill,
forward you the resolution. You can pass it.
Jill, at
There you
some
go,
point
Tom.
when it's not 11 o'clock at night, maybe we can talk
Yes.
through about cleaning that up and making sure the right people are involved and people who are on there want to be on there and so forth. You
Got
can
it.
let me know when that's convenient for you.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Rob.
Thank you for
Thank you,
being
Rob.
patient, Rob.
I enjoyed the rest of the meeting. It's very entertaining.
Glad it was.
Okay.
So glad we aim to please.
So we've got a couple of administrative items on
And
the
if
agenda.
just before I go, if there's other things that you want, please let me know in the email and I'll send them all out to you relating to this, or we can just wait till after the committee meets. Okay?
Okay,
Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Rob.
Rob.
bye.
Bye.
Okay, we've got adoption of minutes. So Ed, there are a set of 4 minutes. I only have 2 members of my board who were here, were sitting members when these minutes took place. They're actually Christina's minutes. The board adopts them, but they don't really.
Isn't it technically that we would accept the minutes?
Yeah, you just accept the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the board, just because, Chris, Tara, and Vicky are sitting here looking at minutes to accept that they don't really approve them. They just accept them as the town clerk's minutes. Okay. So I don't know if there's any questions on those 4 sets of minutes. The next is authorization to purchase a police vehicle. This is actually an unmarked police car. The last meeting we had 2 marked police cars included in our 2022 budget of for $29,112. And last but not least, an authorization to renew the annual installment contract for the voice recording system. All of our police calls are recorded, and so there's a just shy of $10,000 annual fee for that. Again, included in the budget, but anytime we have in some of these larger expenditures, we'd like the board to know about it. And then I've got our proposed actions. So Lauren, we're going to table the resolution in support of the Westchester County Airport Advisory Board. So let's keep that over for a little bit.
Sorry, there were the two more that were added, the SG cash bond agreement and
Oh.
the chemicals, the chlorine chemicals.
Okay, Ed, do you want to talk to the board about the SG?
Sure. On SG, folks may have seen it reported today that Summit sold the retail portion of the campus. Well, the residential portion is being sold to Toll Brothers. That closing should be within the next several weeks. As part of that transfer of ownership, there's a cash escrow that the town is holding to ensure that, let's just call it, the owner of the residential completes certain improvements down at the Sawmill River Parkway. And just, it's been a long time since we spoke about this, so I just want to explain a little bit what that is. So right now, if you're going down Roaring Brook Road, approaching the traffic light and heading westbound, what you're going to have, instead of one turning lane left, you're going to have two. And you're going to have a more fully developed slip lane that will take you north. And on the opposite side, you're going to have a dedicated left-hand turn lane. No improvements on the sawmill itself. You're also going to have some changes with respect to the signalization and the timing. So those improvements have to be made by the owner of the residential. The escrow, $600,000 in escrow that the town's holding is to ensure that that happens. All that this modification is doing is essentially substituting Toll Brothers as the new owner and giving them the ability, if for some reason it's not Summit, but the entity that is currently in title and has this obligation to do these improvements, if they don't follow through, Toll would have the ability to make the improvements themselves and to have recourse to this escrow if that became necessary. The reason that's important is because this, at some point, COs for the townhomes can no longer issue unless those improvements are complete. So there's this obligation, this hard obligation that the residential owner has, and it's backstopped against the issuance of the COs. So again, short version, this is really just to facilitate the transfer of ownership to Toll and to deal with this, the disposition of this cash escrow should it become necessary to use.
So Ed, it's my understanding that what this is essentially doing is the work needs to be done no matter what. We're not changing that requirement that the work be done in order for a CO to issue. What we're being asked to do here is essentially say, if Summit Greenfield doesn't do that work for any reason, that we are allowing Toll Brothers to do that work in order for the COs to issue, and that work still needs to be done to, full completeness pursuant to the permit issued by the Department of Transportation, I believe, right? The New York State Department of Transportation, not even the town.
Right, it's a DOT, and there's a long backstory to this, and a lot of hard work got done by Bob Cioli. There was a conflict between DOT and DEP because there are wetlands down at the sawmill by the railroad tracks there, and a conflict in what these agencies wanted to achieve. It took a long time to work out, but the good news is it is worked out, and I believe it's fair to say that they have a clear path to actually getting this done over the summer. So by the end of the summer, you may actually have these improvements finished.
Right.
Okay.
So we're not relieving anyone from any liability. We're just basically saying if A doesn't do it, then B can do it as long as it gets done.
B being Toll, yes, they have a seat at the table now too.
Okay. All right.
I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with that. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I'm fine with it as well. I mean, Ed, I asked the one question on the agreement, but it's a technical point, right? Whether the right for Toll Brothers only applies when the closing occurs. I can't imagine a scenario where they would step into those shoes if they didn't close the deal, but that just seemed like, a minor open nit.
We can add that.
Yeah, also, this may seem obvious, but the obligation does remain with someone to do the work.
It
Right, not
remains
us.
with the current owner of the
Right.
residential.
And obviously, they would absolutely want to do the work, otherwise, they can't sell the units.
Right, toll is
But yeah,
as motivated
but
as
I didn't
anyone.
see that. I didn't see that directly provided for. Maybe
All
I
right,
missed.
I thought that it was that Summit Greenfield technically still retains
Yeah.
that obligation.
It is,
But
That is,
Toll Brothers is saying if for some reason they don't do it, and now they're the new owners of the property, they don't want to be left with not being able to obtain COs because Summit Greenfield, a third party to them, is not doing the work. They want to have the ability to take over that work and do it to the specifications required by Department of Transportation and the DEP and whoever else is involved in that permit. Correct?
that's exactly right. And look, frankly, they both should be motivated because it was the current owner that tendered the escrow. So, they want to see the work done and they want the escrow back.
Right. And that will remain if we adopt this resolution, the escrow will not
Yes.
change, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but does the obligation remain with one of the parties?
It remains primary with the
Yes.
current owner, yes. Which
Okay,
we'll call Summit. It's actually a different entity name, but let's refer.
yeah, right, I saw. Okay,
I'm good.
yeah, same here.
Mhm. Yes, I am as well.
So I think if there is a way that if we can approve this tonight, I know it would, if we can't, we can't, but I know it's needed for a potential sale of the residential.
Yeah, we have a couple of resolutions to do now, so that's included.
Yep.
Okay, anybody want to start?
Okay. Does anyone have the resolutions in front of them?
Yeah, I can start as long as I don't have to do all of them.
Well, you're not doing the airport, so don't get so, don't get,
A lot shorter.
Not getting excited.
okay.
All right, so I move, let me make sure I'm at the beginning. I move to authorize the hiring of Seth Jordan Chrysler as student intern within the engineering department at the rate of $1,500 for a minimum 6-week period effective January 31, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next.
Skip to number 3.
Okay, I move to accept the following sets of minutes. November 30, 2021 of the town board meeting, December 7th, 2021 of the town board meeting, December 14th, 2021 town board meeting, December 21, 2021 work session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll
I
take the next two if I don't have to do the
Okay.
SG agreement.
Take it away.
I move to authorize the purchase of a 2022 unmarked Ford Transit Connect van for the total cost of $29,112.71 as per the quote from buyer Ford dated January 17th, 2021.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve a lease from Fleetwood Finance Leasing LLC at 184 North Avenue East, Suite 4, Cranford, New Jersey, 07016, for a voice recording system for a term of 5 years with the cost of the first year, 2021, being $3,250 and years 2 through 5, 2022 through 2025 at the annual rate of $9,889.66, bringing the total cost over the term of the lease to $42,808.64.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, sorry, guys, 2 long ones.
Jeremy?
There's no need to read the whereas clauses verbatim.
Oh, so I'm sorry, this is number
Six.
6,
Yeah.
the resolution authorizing modification of a cash bond agreement. Whereas, I'll just read the first paragraph to start, whereas on October 16, 2018, in connection with Summit Greenfield, submission to a New York State DOT Perm 33 Commercial Access Highway Work Permit application, Summit Greenfield provided the town with $600,000 cash bond and entered into a cash bond agreement concerning said bond to guarantee certain improvements to the Sawmill River Parkway pursuant to condition 65 of the site development plan approval for the Chapel Crossing retail development dated December 16th, 2015, last amended March 17, 2020, which requires completion of the SMRP improvements to the satisfaction of the New York State Department of Transportation secured by the cash bond agreement. Furthermore, therefore, it is hereby resolved and that the town board of the town of Newcastle hereby authorizes amendments subject to review and approval as to form and substance by the town attorney of the cash bond agreement to permit Toll Brothers to perform under the cash bond agreement in the event that CLS Chapel IA LLC fails to satisfy its obligation under the cash bond agreement pursuant to condition 57A, to make the escrow funds available to Toll Brothers for its costs incurred in performing the SMRP improvement pursuant to the cash bond agreement, and be it further resolved that other conditions and terms of the cash bond agreement and the town board's October 16, 2018 resolution remain in full force and effect without modification.
And I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Resolution accepting proposed contract modification to purchase of water treatment chlorine. I move to adopt the following resolution. Whereas by resolution adopted June 8th of this last year, the town board accepted a bid from Jones Chemicals, JCI, to supply liquid chlorine at a fixed price of $1.20 per pound for use of the Millman treatment plant for a term of 1 year. And as further reflected in these additional whereas, now therefore it be resolved that the town board hereby accepts JCI's increased price for the delivery of liquid chlorine of $1.46 a pound, but with other terms, conditions, and specifications of its supply contract with JCI remaining unchanged. And that, therefore be it further resolved that the town administrator, the Commissioner of Public Works, and the town controller are authorized to execute such documents and take such further actions as needed to implement this resolution.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that it,
All right.
correct?
I think that's it. Can I have a motion to adjourn before it hits midnight?
I
So
move
moved.
to adjourn the meeting at 11:17 PM.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everybody. I'm so sorry for
everyone. Thank
keeping
you.
you all here so late.
Thank you.
Aye,
Great
everyone.
job
Thanks,
earlier
everyone.
tonight.